The grand hall of Alveria echoed with whispers softer than the rustling of silk. Princess Anya, her hands clasped to quell their trembling, awaited the council's verdict. The dragon treaty, the tenuous thread binding her kingdom to the majestic creatures of the Skyfire Ridge, hung in the balance. A treaty forged in a time of desperation, it was now seen by many as a symbol of weakness. "They are beasts, Princess," Lord Garston. His voice, a rumble of contempt, broke the strained silence. "Their presence is a yoke around our necks." Anya's chin lifted, her gaze unwavering. She knew the tales, the songs of an era when dragons and humans warred for dominion. Yet she also knew something her advisers did not, something hidden deep within herself, an echo of scales and fire, a connection she could scarcely comprehend. The treaty had always required a royal to act as a conduit, a symbol of Alveria's commitment. For generations, her ancestors had maintained the delicate pact, their ability to faintly sense the dragons a mark of their lineage. Anya's gift, however, blazed far brighter, a wild, untamed thrum in her blood. "The dragons keep the wyvern hordes at bay," she reminded the council. "Without them, those horrors of the north would descend upon us." "A fear we can face ourselves," Garston retorted. "Our armies grow stronger with each passing moon." Arrogance laced his tone, and Anya suppressed a surge of anger. The true danger lay not in the wyvern hordes, but in the hunger she sensed stirring within the Skyfire Ridge itself. An imbalance, a growing darkness, something she dared not voice aloud. "The princess is correct," a lilting voice cut through the tension. Lady Alara, the court sorceress, stood, her gaze sweeping across the council. "The treaty holds far more than a promise of protection. We have enjoyed centuries of peace, our knowledge of the arcane enriched by their ancient wisdom. The princess has yet to prove her connection strong enough." Garston's words were a cold accusation. Anya felt a spear of ice pierce her heart. He was right. While she sensed the dragons, a wisp of their emotions brushing against her consciousness, she had never truly reached out, never bridged the gulf between their species. Fear, a creature she had battled since childhood, wormed its way into her resolve. "I will prove myself," she declared, her voice ringing with a determination she desperately hoped was genuine. "I will renew the bond." Her declaration was met with a mix of sceptical looks and thinly veiled scorn. It was a fool's gamble, yet to do nothing was to surrender Alveria to a war they could not win, a war fueled by ignorance and pride. The journey to Skyfire Ridge, a haven of volcanic peaks and shimmering lakes nestled deep within the Whitethorn Mountains, was a solemn one. A small retinue accompanied her, loyal guardsmen, Lady Alara, and, to Anya's growing unease, Lord Garston. His presence was a constant reminder of the opposition she would face upon her return. Garston sought to replace the dragons with his own growing legions, heavily armoured knights he believed were superior to any scaled beast. Yet Anya knew brute force would mean nothing against true dragonfire. Nights were spent under the vast starlit sky, tales of the dragons filling the campfire crackle. Her guardsmen spoke not as Anya did, of raw power, but of a strange, quiet wisdom the creatures possessed, a guardianship their ancestors had come to rely upon. As the jagged silhouette of Skyfire Ridge loomed closer, unease gave way to a strange exhilaration. The thrum of dragons resonated through her, not as a distant echo, but as a wild symphony within reach. The gift that had so often burdened her became a beacon, a path laid before her. "They are close," she murmured, the hair along her arms raising in awareness. A sense of vastness washed over her, the presence of minds as ancient as the mountains themselves. The trail wound through a narrow gorge, its walls painted in hues of molten red and gold. The air grew charged, each breath heavy with the smell of sulphur and something achingly primal. A low rumble echoed through the cliffs, a vibration more felt than heard. Her guardsmen drew their swords, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. Even Lord Garston, his ever-present arrogance tempered, gripped the hilt of his weapon a shade too tightly. A shadow blotted out the sun, and a roar shattered the stillness. From above a sinuous form descended, its scales gleaming like obsidian. The dragon landed with a ground-shaking thud, its head lowering until its single golden eye was level with Anya. Time seemed to suspend. The dragon's presence was a living storm. Instinct screamed at her to flee, to cringe, yet she fought the urge, meeting its gaze with a determination born of desperation. Within that vast alien mind she sensed curiosity, surprise, a flicker of something akin to recognition. The whisper brushed against her consciousness, a wave of images and emotions almost too raw to bear, a pride scarred by raids, nestlings slain, a deep-seated mistrust of her kind. Anya recoiled, the pain of those memories not her own. "They are wounded," she gasped, her innate connection flaring in recognition of the dragon's pain. "Someone is poaching them." A growl rumbled through the dragon, confirming her worst suspicion. The fragile balance was teetering on the brink of collapse. She had hoped for a renewal, but the task now took on a far more desperate measure. "I offer aid," she spoke aloud, her voice unwavering. "Let me prove our intentions." The dragon hesitated, then inclined its massive head in a gesture that could be taken as cautious acceptance. Lady Alara stepped forward, her robes a swirl of emerald against the stark landscape. A soft murmur of ancient incantations drifted on the smoky air, weaving a fragile thread of understanding between the sorceress and the dragon. Anya closed her eyes, focusing on the connection, amplifying it. Each pulse of the dragon's pain resonated through her, revealing the wound's location. His leg. An arrow is lodged deep. Her guardsmen exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared voice their doubt. Anya felt Lord Garston's smouldering gaze upon her, the unspoken accusation of witchcraft hanging heavy in the air. With careful gestures she approached the dragon, its wary eye never strayed from her, its nostrils flaring with every step. Closer now, the sheer scale of the creature struck her. Each claw alone was the size of a dagger. Yet the vulnerability in its posture, the way it held its injured leg, stirred something protective within her. "Your Grace," Ilara's voice held a note of warning. "Dragons heal swiftly. To remove the arrow would invite—" "Trust," Anya retorted softly, her eyes never leaving the dragon's gaze. "That is all we have left to offer." The dragon rumbled, low and questioning. Anya sent a wave of soothing intent, a flicker of her own memories of childhood scrapes and Ilara's careful healing touch. With the subtlest of movements, the dragon extended its wounded leg. Anya knelt, placing a tentative hand on its scaled hide. The heat radiating from it was intense, but beneath the roughness lay a pulse, a thrumming heartbeat mirroring the connection in her own veins. Focusing, she located the arrow embedded in the creature's flesh. With a twist and a sharp tug, bolstered by Ilara's subtle magic, the projectile came free. The dragon flinched, a ripple running through its immense form, but it held still. Acrid blood mingled with the smell of sulphur. Ilara quickly salved the wound, her chanted spells weaving a balm of ancient knowledge and raw energy. The dragon's breaths grew less laboured, the wariness in its gaze beginning to soften. "It is done," Anya murmured, the bond between them strengthening with each passing moment. Images flickered in her mind. Lush valleys, sparkling lakes, the sense of flight and freedom that came with seeing the world through a dragon's eyes. And always, the underlying flicker of fear, distrust, a wound far deeper than any arrow could inflict. Rising, Anya met Lord Garston's hard glare. She understood his ambition now, his eagerness to replace the dragons with his legions. But his vision was warped by pride, by a blindness to the bond between Alveria and the creatures of Skyfire Ridge. "You see," she challenged, "with trust even they can be healed. Now it's our turn to honour the treaty and root out those who would shatter it." Her voice was firm, echoing with the certainty she had struggled so long to find. To her surprise, a few of her guardsmen murmured their agreement, their fear slowly giving way to admiration. Yet Garston remained stoic, a shadow marring the newfound hope. His allegiance, she now knew, would not be easily won. The return to Alveria was a blur. She spent countless hours in communion with the dragon, its name, Ethan, a whisper of fire against her mind, echoing with every beat of her heart. The creature, still wary, allowed her glimpses of its world, the sprawling nests carved upon perilous cliffsides, the hatchlings frolicking with surprising gentleness, the vast swaths of land they protected. News of the healed dragon spread like wildfire, whispered with awe in the taverns, and debated with fresh perspective in the council chambers. Stories of bravery and understanding began to replace tales of terror, kindling a flickering hope within Anya. Yet Lord Garston's opposition only solidified. He denounced her visions as trickery, her connection to the dragons as dark sorcery. The council, once so certain of their path, became a house divided, mirroring the discord brewing within Alveria itself. It was Ilara who brought the grim truth to light. Garston, in his ambition, had made a pact of his own. Poachers, lured by the promise of power and gold, were harvesting dragon scales and teeth, prized ingredients in dark rituals. The disrupted balance in Skyfire Ridge, the raids on their nests. It was orchestrated, a desperate ploy to turn public favour against the treaty. Armed with this knowledge, Anya confronted Garston before the full council. The proof of his treachery was undeniable. His facade of righteous ambition crumbled, replaced by the desperate fury of a cornered beast. In the end, his own guards dragged him from the hall in chains. With the traitor unmasked, the council's resolve rallied. Anya, armed with the knowledge bestowed by Ethan, led a contingent to the poachers' camps, hidden deep within the mountains. It was a swift and brutal battle. Men driven by greed were no match for the righteous fury of Alveria's warriors, fueled by a desire to protect, not conquer. The aftermath was a bittersweet one. Freed from the poachers' influence, the dragon's aggression eased. Yet the wounds of the past remained. Anya spent tireless days high within the Skyfire Ridge, meditating with Ethan and the other dragons, sharing visions of cooperation, of the wyvern threat looming in the shadowed north. Her task was immense, yet the bond between her and the dragons grew stronger. The princess, who had been seen as weak, was now a beacon of change, her ability to commune with the dragons, a symbol of the true power Alveria held. Time, as fluid as the mists swirling over Skyfire Ridge, stretched and blurred. News spread throughout the neighbouring kingdoms, carried by bards and merchants alike. Tales of Alveria and their dragon princess were met with a mix of wonder, fear and envy. Anya became a figure of legend even as she toiled tirelessly to heal the rift between her people and the dragons. The threat of the wyvern hordes was ever present, a tangible darkness against which Anya's visions proved invaluable. The dragons, sharing her foresight, became strategists, their knowledge of the terrain and ancient flight patterns an unmatched advantage. Together they orchestrated preemptive strikes against the encroaching monstrosities, driving them back from Alveria's borders. Yet it was the smaller victories that truly gave Anya hope. Farmers who found their lost sheep guarded by a slumbering dragon. Travellers rescued from bandits by a sudden thunderous roar. Tales of courage and kinship began to eclipse the old epics of conquest. Alveria wasn't merely surviving, it was thriving. Trade routes expanded, bolstered by the watchful eyes of dragons overhead. Scholars flocked to Anya's court, eager to piece together fragments of knowledge from both human and dragon lore. For the first time in countless generations, it felt as though a lasting peace could take root. The day came when Ethan, his scales gleaming with renewed health, took to the skies with Anya upon his back. It was a day of celebration, a testament to the trust rebuilt. They soared above Alveria, her cheers rising to meet them. Below, nestled among the green fields and the bustling city, Anya's heart swelled with a fierce joy. Her gift had not been a burden after all, but a bridge. The serenity was not eternal. A raven arrived, its claws bearing a message sealed with the crest of their neighbouring kingdom, Valoria. Anya's heart plummeted as she unfurled the parchment. King Tarquin, an old ally of her father, pleaded for aid. The wyvern hordes, relentless and merciless, were ravaging his lands. The council convened with a haste born of desperation. Alveria had only just emerged from its own struggles. Could they risk aiding another land? Lord Garston's replacement, Lord Burton, voiced the concerns many harboured. Was this a ploy, an attempt by Valoria to claim Alveria's dragons for their own defence? Anya found herself facing a new kind of battle. To do nothing would condemn Valoria to ruin, yet spreading Alveria's forces thin could lead to a resurgence of the threat they had so painstakingly overcome. Sleepless nights followed, filled with whispered strategy sessions with Ilara and fraught flights to consult with the dragons. Ethan's wisdom proved invaluable. The wyverns, he explained, were driven by a primal hunger. Their queen, a monstrous creature far larger and more cunning than her brood, was the key. If they could eliminate her, the hordes would scatter, their threat severely diminished. A daring plan took shape. Anya would lead a small elite force, her most skilled warriors and Ilara, into the heart of Valoria. While Valoria's armies engaged the hordes, they would strike at the source. The dragons reluctantly would remain, safeguarding Alveria from any opportunistic attack. The farewell was bittersweet. Ethan nuzzled her gently, the rumble in his chest a vibration of worry and fierce protectiveness. Riding upon her trusted steed, Anya led her contingent across the border. A knot of tension lodged beneath her breastbone. Valoria was a land in mourning. Villages lay in smouldering ruins, fields were trampled battlegrounds, and the stench of death clung to the desolate landscape. King Tarquin, once a figure of regal pride, was haggard, his shoulders slumped beneath the weight of despair. Yet amidst the sorrow, Anya found a steely resolve. They convened in the depths of Valoria's war room, maps spread upon the table. Tarquin's generals, weary but resolute, outlined the grim situation. The Wyvern Queen nested within the treacherous Bonefire Peaks, a desolate volcanic range shunned by all but the most desperate creatures. Anya's plan was met with shocked silence. Infiltration of the nest itself was nigh impossible. The Wyvern Queen, surrounded by her brood, was virtually unassailable. Yet to retreat was to surrender Valoria to oblivion, and that Anya could not fathom. "We must draw her out," Anya proposed, her voice echoing in the tense stillness. "A lure she cannot resist." Ilara's eyes narrowed in contemplation. The magic required, it would be dangerous, a risk to us all. "A risk worth taking," Anya countered, her determination unwavering. The image of Ethan and the dragons of Skyfire Ridge flashed in her mind, their unbound freedom a stark contrast to the devastation surrounding her. The plan hinged on Ilara's vast arcane knowledge and Anya's connection to Ethan. Anya would venture deep into the Bonefire Peaks with her warriors, carrying an artifact imbued with Ilara's magic, a beacon simulating the raw power of a dragon's essence. It was a desperate gamble, designed to ignite the Wyvern Queen's ravenous fury and lure her away from her nest. As they prepared, a shadow fell over the camp. Valoria's scouts stumbled in, their faces pale. The main horde was advancing far quicker than anticipated. Anya exchanged a dark look with Tarquin. Time had run out. Failure was not an option. The ascent into the Bonefire Peaks was an ordeal. Ashy air choked their lungs and the ground beneath their boots trembled with barely suppressed volcanic fury. Each step was laden with the certainty that they were marching into a death trap. Anya drew strength from the unwavering determination of her warriors, their grim faces a testament to their courage. Ilara moved silently beside her, the artifact clutched in her hands, its thrumming power a palpable thing. They reached a desolate plateau, a crumbling amphitheatre of rock overlooking a vast caldera. Nestled within its depths, Anya spotted a writhing mass of monstrous forms, the wyvern hordes. And at their centre, a creature so massive it dwarfed its offspring, the Wyvern Queen, her scales like tarnished obsidian and her eyes burning with a terrible hunger. "It is time," Anya whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. With trembling hands she took the artifact from Ilara. The sorceress's chant rose, a web of ancient words and desperate energy weaving around the object. It pulsed with brilliant light, the simulated dragon essence flaring like a beacon in the desolate landscape. Anya raised it high, her eyes locked on the Queen. The effect was instantaneous. A furious roar echoed through the peaks, shaking the very ground. Anya barely had time to dive behind a boulder as the Queen took flight, her brood scrambling after her. The thunder of their wings blotted out all other sound, their monstrous forms painting grotesque shadows across the sky. They circled above them, driven into a frenzy by the artifact's glow. Anya's heart pounded a panicked rhythm against her ribs, but she gripped the object tightly, channeling every ounce of her will into maintaining the illusion. Finally the Queen descended, her eyes burning with rage and greed. With a deafening shriek she snatched the artifact in one clawed talon, crushing it. A wave of hot air washed over Anya as the light sputtered and died. The sudden end to the simulated power must have struck the creature as an ambush. Her head whipped around, fangs bared, searching for the treacherous dragon. "Now!" Anya screamed, signalling her hidden archers. Their arrows soared, a desperate volley aimed to drive the Queen away. The wyverns scattered, their roars shaking the crumbling cliffs. Singed and enraged, their Queen spiralled into the sky, her shriek a promise of vengeance. Yet the trap was sprung. The beast was away from her nest and they had gained precious time. Anya sagged against the boulder, the roar of blood in her ears mingling with shouts of her warriors. They had survived, but the true battle had just begun. The return to Valoria was a desperate race against time. Each mile brought them closer to the main horde, a seething mass intent on consuming everything in its path. Anya rode relentlessly, the fate of a kingdom hanging heavily upon her. They reached Valoria's ravaged capital as the last light bled from the sky. King Tarquin's army, bolstered by their desperate hope, awaited their arrival. There was no time for elaborate strategies, only the desperate courage in their hearts and the knowledge that failure would mean annihilation. Anya and Ilara stood upon the ramparts, overlooking the battlefield, where monstrous forms assembled in the encroaching darkness. With a final echoing chant, Ilara unleashed her remaining power into the night sky. It manifested not as a beacon this time, but as a ward, a shimmering veil between the wyverns and the city. The first wave of monstrosities smashed into the barrier, their shrieks splitting the night. It held, flickering but enduring. Anya ordered her archers to unleash their fire-tipped arrows, igniting the creatures trapped against the barrier. They fought with the fury of the cornered, yet for each wyvern that fell, 2 more took its place. The barrier wavered, Ilara slumped against the crenellations, drained. Fear slithered like a serpent in Anya's gut. Was this the end? Then a thunderous roar split the sky, a sound even the monstrous horde seemed to falter against. Anya's heart soared. Ethan descended, a magnificent silhouette against the smoke-choked sky. And he was not alone. The dragons of Skyfire Ridge, drawn by Anya's anguished calls, had come. They swooped and soared, spitting gouts of flame that set swaths of the battlefield ablaze. They tore into the horde with a ferocity born of defending their own. All rippled through the ranks of Valorian soldiers. The legends were true. The dragon princess had saved them. It was a brutal, bloody battle, fought tooth and nail upon the ravaged earth. Anya herself was no mere observer, but a warrior, her sword gleaming as she cut a path through her monstrous foes. The tide slowly turned, driven by courage and the terrible beauty of the dragons, fighting with the fierce loyalty they had for so long denied. At last, as dawn painted the sky, the Wyvern Queen emerged. Fueled by fury, she tore through the magical barrier and turned her sights on Anya. The princess stood her ground, her sword trembling before her. In that final moment, before the monstrous creature could strike, Ethan landed, shielding her. The clash of the titans shook the battlefield. Ethan, wounded but unyielding, fought with the strength of 10. Anya dashed forward, a flicker of steel in the chaos. She aimed her strike at a gash in the queen's scaled hide, a weakness she had glimpsed in a shared vision with Ethan. Her blade struck true, burying itself deep into the monstrous flesh. The queen shrieked, rearing back. Anya was thrown clear, but the distraction had served its purpose. Ethan raked his talons across the creature's exposed flank, drawing another agonized bellow. The queen staggered then, with a final ear-splitting shriek, took flight, abandoning her brood. Driven by primal terror, the remaining wyverns followed, scattering into the desolate landscape. Exhausted and wounded, Anya sank to her knees. Ilara rushed to her side, but her smile was genuine, her eyes brimming with tears of relief. Above them, Ethan roared a victory cry that echoed across the shattered plains. The battle was won, and a new legend was born, a legend of the princess who bridged the chasm, of the day dragon saved a kingdom.